Way back when, Americans and American companies prided themselves on the value of hard work. The American dream itself was predicated on these opportunities that are given to everyone to work for a better life. But somewhere along the way, fairness stopped meaning equal opportunity, and it meant equity and identity politics instead. Then these institutions that were meant to defend workers and protect their opportunities ended up poisoning the well of fair labor. How did we get here? My name is Siena Rose, and we need to talk about what has happened to fair labor in the American workforce and the effects that equity and DEI have had on it. Since its origin, the United States has gone through revolutionary changes on everything from societal expectations to the nature of work, to cultural values and merit, and even to the general understanding of the American identity. Early American labor at the turn of the 19th century was booming. America was known as the land of opportunity, and people from all over the world immigrated to America to embrace the American way of life because it offered something better, equal opportunity. On the flip side, for people like me who have been born and raised in America and lived here our entire lives, it's really easy for us to think of something like equal opportunity as a right, as an undeniable trait that we all are entitled to because all people are created equal and therefore equal opportunity naturally follows that line of thought. But for many others across the world, equal opportunity is not a right. It's not even a remotely accessible idea in other parts of the world in the same way that it is for us here. Last week, I sat down with our CEO, Aaron With, for an interview, and it's an awesome interview. I really enjoyed sitting down with him. I recommend going and listening to the interview if you haven't. But in the interview, he talked about his early upbringing in Birmingham, England, and he essentially compared the opportunity and circumstances there to living in a straight-up caste system. In America, we know that it's possible to be born into poverty and to rise up to become a millionaire. It takes, a butt ton of hard work and dedication and discipline and, value and all that merit. But the point is that all American citizens are afforded that equal opportunity to do that. You can be born into a circumstance and then be, through hard work and the opportunities afforded to you, can be risen up into something entirely different. After talking with Aaron, it's clear that in England, as an example of places, that isn't a possibility. The system has been remade in the image of socialism that, sure provides some sort of public care to everyone, but it also removes the opportunity for any true individual to rise up and thrive in their own circumstances. Socialism doesn't necessarily benefit the individual in that stance in the same way that equal opportunity and freedom in America does. Young people my age and younger are especially failing to see this problem for what it is. That's why everyone and your mother is talking about democratic socialism right now. We have democratic socialists that have been elected from the East Coast to the West Coast. We have been bombarded with propaganda that demonizes hard work, that demonizes capitalism, and replaces any real community value with some sort of abstract affirmative action. Then equity entered into the culture in an attempt to reconcile the differences between access to opportunity and real concrete disadvantages that some people had to deal with. Equity and equality were basically, meant to be siblings, two halves of the same solution that were working to keep American values alive and help people who really needed help. It was a supplementary correction that metastasized into a cultural toxin that has had effects, the likes of which we've really never seen before. And speaking personally for a moment here, I was born in 2000, so I'm 25, I'm Gen Z, and my generation clearly has struggled to know the differences and the purpose of equity versus equality. The biggest culprit, I think, and I could say this because it's my own generation, is really how used to the internet we are. The amplified access to everything/anything has had such a monumentally detrimental effect on our minds, but more so, and I think more importantly, our expectations. Gen Zers, and particularly the younger kiddos and generations that have come after mine, we're so used to things in America that we take them for granted instead of privileges. So we expect to be given equal opportunity in everything because it's kind of all we've ever known. And the Overton Window, therefore, has shifted as our expectations have changed with the younger generations and explains more how and why DEI was able to gain entry into fair labor in the first place. The Overton Window is also a term that I first heard my dad use, so shout out Dad. And I didn't know what it meant when he first used it, so I had him explain it to me. And if you haven't heard of it either, if you're unfamiliar, it is a term that outlines the range of subjects and arguments that are politically acceptable to a given mainstream population at a given time. Tracking it tracks the evolution of societal norms and values and in a present time and how it's changed over the years. So what was so far down the spectrum, for example, maybe 30 years ago that couldn't be touched with a 9-foot pole has now shifted with the Overton window to be a part of daily discourse. The clearest and most basic example of this that I can think of is abortion, a very sensitive and hot button topic that 30 years ago, 20 years ago, I remember we talked about this when I was a kid. 20 years ago, the conversation around it was safe, legal, and rare. And if you've been on the internet at any point in the past month to a week to 24 hours, you'll know that that same conversation is very different. The discourse has changed fundamentally because as we've shifted down the Overton window, what has become acceptable in daily discourse to talk about has changed as well. So all that to say, DEI and its relation to fair labor has been heavily influenced by the younger generations, shifting of influences, and the Overton window's shifting of expectations with that. There are many fair labor practices out there, discussions about fair labor that discuss working conditions and treatment. That is not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm not critiquing any of those practices in this discussion. Rather, I just want to highlight how DEI has fundamentally changed labor and attitudes around work in the United States. As I said, the Overton window has shifted, and things that were once viewed as privileges or even outlandish dreams are now viewed as, for better or for worse, reality or an expectation. Another example that I can think of is that once upon a time, immigrants came to America and they had to go through rigorous requirements in some cases, to be able to work and live here. And now we have stories coming out of immigrants who come to America who can't read or speak English, who came here illegally and are still being issued working licenses, such as commercial driver's licenses, to be able to work in America. What has happened? The Overton window has shifted tremendously. What's also happened, in my opinion, is that with the rise of the internet and its effect in our world and on our minds, the traits of curiosity and patience have been heavily discouraged. If you want to learn something, for example, like you don't have to go to the library and spend 4 hours studying up on the subject. Instead, you Google it and 4 seconds later, you know the answer to your question. So it's been programmed into our minds through that insane continual reinforcement that waiting for anything is oppressive. Therefore, hard work is oppressive, or therefore hard work is actually unfair. That's where we've come to right now. And when the opportunity to work hard for something is not viewed as a right, not even as a privilege, but actually something that's unfair and oppressive, well, for heaven's sakes, it's no wonder that socialism and communism are so unbelievably attractive to our younger generation, because those two ideologies push the idea that everyone else works for you. And then we add into the pot diversity and equity and inclusion to emphasize further that the best thing that you have to offer the world isn't merit or value or hard work, but actually some random subset of your identity. And then that aversion to actual merit-based excellence continues to get worse. Under DEI, your worth isn't valued by what you can contribute or by what you can produce. It's measured by whatever group you happen to belong to. Aaron With, during our interview, he talked about this, and from his perspective, he thinks that this is some sort of weird product of generational hard work. There's that saying that came to mind that goes, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times, and then it kind of continues. And while that point is somewhat overused, it very much still stands. Culture, whenever people were doing good work, became so good that the Overton window started hovering over that next societal thing to look at, which was identity politics. And that perverted the view of equity so much that it stopped fixing the problems that it was introduced to solve. Instead, it just made things worse. And this DEI disease, as I've fondly come to think of it, and a version of hard work, can also be linked to the rise of public unions too, and their input on this. Private sector unions during the Industrial Revolution originally fought against abuse and bad working conditions. They unionized to change absolutely hellish working conditions, long work weeks, poor wages, and more. What they didn't fight against during all that time was productivity, because if the business was less productive, it would mean layoffs. And in a culture where your work and the opportunity to work is of paramount importance, no one wanted productivity to go down. Public unions, though, as we know, don't care about productivity as much as they do total membership numbers. And in the public sector, those two attributes are not dependent on each other to grow in the same way that it is maybe in the private sector. In fact, public unions can grow an employee membership without having to grow productivity, which is exactly where the problem of this lies. The biggest unions in the country now argue over DEI and identity politics, and their largest agenda items very clearly place identity and equity over any sort of merit-based excellence. They also innately value socialism and communism over a capitalist society because those beliefs also help push the narrative that hard work is unfair and oppressive, and so therefore you need to be part of a larger unit that can help bear the weight with you, no matter how mediocre or even negative the benefits of being in that unit may be. It's also, not even to say, it's so unbelievably ironic to me that union leaders push socialism and communism so badly, two ideologies that prevent individual growth. Yet union leaders themselves are products of basically capitalism and their principles because they have benefited the most from individual growth. They're the top of a union. There's one person at the top of a union. How do you think they got there? Individual growth, basically capitalist principles, and yet when they benefit from capitalism, they don't want anyone else to have it. It's ridiculous. This particular cultural fallout that we are facing, that we're dealing with right now, this poisoning of the water hole, if we're staying with the metaphor, is so unbelievably bad. It is so severe. This entitlement, I mean, we're kind of seeing it right now, but this entitlement culture plus a government-managed safety net, plus a merit-based work aversion equals a very deadly stagnation that I feel like will kill our culture and kill our work culture if we're not careful. And unfortunately, we're kind of seeing the effects of that happen right now. For heaven's sake, there's videos of Gen Zers and younger folks who get degrees in gender studies and are quiet quitting instead of saying it with their chest. And they also complain about not having a job. Well, they also admit to not wanting to actually work hard. And then they say that socialism is the right way to go because they don't understand that the rights in their life are not rights, but privileges because of the work that we live in, because we live in a capitalist society that was built on the merit of hard work and selfless sacrifice. I told you that this is a cultural toxin that has metastasized into something deadly, and we're seeing the effects of it happen in everyday life. In its entry to labor, DEI promised fairness but delivered fragility. We know that the only true equality is opportunity. The Freedom Foundation, thank goodness, knows this, and we know that there needs to be safeguards in place to prevent socialism from taking over our nation and killing all of the things that America has stood for. The first step, I believe, of this comes with education. It comes with recognizing where these influences are coming from. It's coming first from the teachers' unions, who are organizing an ideological assault on America's children. And secondly, it's coming from all angles of other government unions who are reinforcing those beliefs by lying to all levels of the working class. And it's coming from politicians who are in cahoots with this assault, like Zohran Mamdani, for example, or Jay Jones, or Mikey Sherrill, or Sean Spiller, or AOC. All that DEI and equity have done is teach an entire generation that someone else owes them success. You cannot equity your way into prosperity. You cannot equity your way into becoming a hard worker. What actually gets you there is rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work yourself. And it shouldn't be oppressive or unfair to say that. America didn't become the greatest country on earth because everyone was hired based on their identity. It became the greatest because merit and discipline and good old-fashioned grit were encouraged. Because despite what people like Randy Weingarten and Lee Saunders would have you believe, the real American dream has never changed. It's just waiting for anyone who's willing to work for it.